folks are asking themselves, why am I paying 5 times as much to live in New York? Literally true.
Right.
When I can live in Dallas, and when I want to be in New York for the U.S. Open, I could be in New York for the U.S. Open, right? And when I don't want to be there, I can be someplace that's a lot easier on my pocketbook. People are friendly, weather's milder, and my money goes further. So it's a great situation to be in here.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to Real Texans? Welcome to this edition of Real Texans, not in our usual location, instead in the fair city of Dallas, sitting down with the 60th mayor of Dallas, Eric Johnson. Mayor Johnson, thanks for sitting down with me today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Mayor, you were elected in 2019 after having served almost a decade in the Texas House, and now you have been working for 7 years in the city of Dallas. We talked about this a second ago. I'm not sure this is entirely fair, but it feels like Dallas is having, how do we call it, a renaissance? You use the phrase having a moment, right? Why? Why now? Is it because New York City is such shambles and seems to be continuing to stay in shambles? Or is it because of things that Dallas and Texas have been doing? Why is Dallas on the rise?
Well, Michael, as is so often the case, it's a little bit of both, or it's more complicated than just one thing. So, a couple of those reasons can both be true at the same time. And in fact, in this case, they are. So I think it's kind of a push-pull. So let's talk about the pull, which I would say are the things that we're doing right. So Dallas is having a moment, but this is not new. Dallas has been, I think, of all the cities in Texas, sort of to me, Dallas is the business capital of Texas. It's where so many of our, iconic Fortune 500 companies got their start. Southwest Airlines, and that famous napkin that Herb Kelleher mapped out, the route Dallas to Houston, Houston to San Antonio to Dallas on a napkin. That happened here. Texas Instruments, that started here. So Dallas has always been, I think, a very business-friendly place. The Fortune 500 companies, spawned, I think, a cadre of folks who I think led to a lot of our private equity activity, family offices, venture capital activity. So, Dallas has been doing well for a long time. But I think what has accelerated things in terms of the moment that we're having in this Y'all Street development, which I think is what a lot of people are hearing about now and putting Dallas on the map nationally, has to do with a combination of what we're doing right in the pro-business environment that we've always had and what New York is doing wrong and what California is doing wrong. So that's the push part of things. So it is true that a few years back in Albany, in the capital, in New York, for whatever reason, they decided they wanted to float the idea of a tax on all securities transactions in New York. That wasn't received very well by the financial services industry. So that started some conversations about moving some of the financial services companies and some of the financial services activity, the exchanges elsewhere. And Dallas emerged as a place that the NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, some other places were considering moving to, and they have in fact increased their presence here. NASDAQ is opening an office here this year. They're here already, but they're opening a regional headquarters here in Dallas. New York Stock Exchange has rebranded what used to be Chicago is the New York Stock Exchange Texas, and they're here. And then, of course, we have our own exchange, the Texas Stock Exchange. So I think that's sort of the both sides of this coin really are Dallas's pro-business reputation. The low tax environment has been in place for a long time in the state, and I have to give the folks in Austin a lot of credit for creating that environment and actually putting things in our state constitution that will not allow us to ever have a state income tax, will not allow us to ever have transactions tax on securities transactions that have helped spur this. So it's been a little bit of both. It's been what others have done wrong, and I think California is also guilty of overregulating and overtaxing their corporations. So just since I've been mayor, we've had a couple of California companies move their headquarters here. CBRE, AECOM have all relocated from California here. And like I said, financial institutions like Goldman Sachs have really doubled down on Dallas. Their investment in Dallas at this point is already approaching $750 million in their new office here. So I think that's a staggering number. I think people need to think about that. I mean, that is a ton of capital to put right into our city center right here in Dallas, in the core of the city. They're going to be employing 5,000 people. Scotiabank out of Canada has announced that they are coming. Their grand opening is next month. 1,000 new jobs there. So, and they didn't have a presence here before at all. So it's pretty incredible. It's a great story. And it's, again, a combination of things.
And, I'll kind of be the wet blanket for a second. Say, what should give pause to you, to your colleagues, the Dallas City Council, state lawmakers, is these folks moving indicates they actually know how to move.
That's right.
Growing up, California was where someone who was young and entrepreneurial, they didn't come to Texas, they went to California. New York has been known for a century and a half as the financial center of the United States. We screw things up. They could leave Dallas, they could leave Texas pretty easily as well, couldn't it?
Absolutely true. Always been true. People who have the ability to move, people who have the types of skills and education, the talent, have always had that option. Those are the kind of folks that have made the cities in America. The country started on the East Coast, obviously. We all took U.S. history. We all know where the country started, and people moved west as they had opportunity to advance themselves and their families. And that's not going to stop. People are going to continue to move to where they see opportunity. I think if we just sort of take a pause, though, and look at where we are in history right now, Dallas really is, I'd say, the buckle of the Sun Belt. And the Sun Belt is where the activity in the United States is right now. The country is developed from coast to coast, from east to west, from sea to shining sea. We've we got people everywhere, but if we look at where the flows of internal migration are within the country, you'll see that the coastal cities are losing population on both coasts. So New York and LA and San Francisco are losing population, and so is Chicago. And the question is, who's gaining population? The answer is the Sun Belt and Florida. So Florida is getting a lot of migration from a lot of the folks in the northeastern cities, but so are we. I mean, New York is actually the third largest source of new residents for Dallas. Right. Behind, you ready? Los Angeles, number 1, Chicago, number 2. So those cities are net losers of folks, and we're net gainers. The Sun Belt writ large is the beneficiary of most of this movement. Everything from Colorado to Tennessee is really benefiting from, but Dallas is getting the lion's share of that. And we are, again, this metro area now is the 4th largest metro area in the United States, and it will soon be the 3rd largest. It will surpass Chicago and become the 3rd largest metro area in the U.S. behind New York and L.A. And I think the reason for that is because people want the cost of living advantages there are to being here. The tax situation is preferable. The weather is great. And you can get everywhere so easily. And that's a credit to folks who had the foresight years ago to build DFW Airport in between Love Field, which is one of the best, national airports that we have, and then DFW, which is one of the best international airports, 3rd busiest in the world. People love being able to jump on a Southwest Airlines flight or an American Airlines flight and fly nonstop to most places in the world. I mean, we've got multiple flights a day to Fiji from here. We've got multiple nonstop flights to Jackson Hole. And of course, every place practical that you'd want to go from coast to coast, not just coast to coast, but even within North America, north and south, easy to get from Dallas to Vancouver, to Toronto, to Montreal, down to Monterrey, Mexico, or Mexico City. Anywhere you want to go to conduct business, not just pleasure travel, is easy from here. And so folks are asking themselves, why am I paying 5 times as much to live in New York? Literally true. When I can live in Dallas, and when I want to be in New York for the U.S. Open, I can be in New York for the U.S. Open, right? And when I don't want to be there, I can be someplace that's a lot easier on my pocketbook. People are friendly, weather's milder, and my money goes further. So it's a great situation to be in here.
I want to sit back for a second and talk about you for a second. You were elected to the Texas House in 2010.
That's right.
You spent, again, almost a decade in the Texas legislature. For many people, I would argue rightly, but for many people, the idea is, well, you run a local office, then you grow out of that, and you go run for a state office, and then you'll run for Congress, and kind of this kind of progression.
Yeah.
Like, you had a very successful career going on in Austin. Folks thought very highly of you on both sides of the aisle. At the time, you were a Democrat. What made you take a look at Dallas? Say, I've got a good gig going in the state legislature, but I think maybe instead I want to go be the mayor of Dallas. What drove that thinking for you?
I think a lot of people, and I'm going to call it respectfully a misconception. I think people have this misconception that politics or public service is like the educational system, where there's elementary school has to be done before junior high, because junior high is predicated on understanding what's going on in elementary school, and then you need to do well in junior high because high school is predicated on what you learn in junior high, and it's all sequential, and it all builds on the next thing, and the goal is to go from elementary school to junior high to high school to college, to graduate school, and then that's a successful academic career. It's very different in politics. Our country is not built and designed for the levels of government to lead from one to the next. They're not there it's not a progression. They serve different functions. They do different things. There's a division of authority and jurisdiction and responsibility that has nothing to do with superior or inferior. It has to do with just some levels of government are better suited to do certain things than others. So my career has never been, and this shocks people, and I get this question so much, not your question, which was, I think, actually quite sophisticated. I get this question all the time, which is not lacking in sophistication, but certainly doesn't, I think about politics the way I've just described it. When I was in the state house, it was, when are you going to run for the state senate or Congress? And then I suppose if I were in Congress, it'd be, when are you going to run for the U.S. Senate? I think everybody's thinking that you need to be moving up this ladder that doesn't actually exist, as I just said. What I've always tried to do, and what my career has always been about, is actually serve. I'm actually interested in public service. I actually am interested in government. I'm actually interested in doing a good job at whatever it is my job is. And so my running for the state legislature wasn't at all predicated on, I think this is a good entry point, or I think this will lead to this. It was where I thought I was needed at the time. I ran against a very corrupt, ineffective incumbent who represented. I didn't move to a district, trying to figure out where I could get elected. It was my home district that I grew up in and where I lived. I didn't have to move to run, because District 100, which I represented in the state house, is the district that my parents raised me in, my grandparents raised my parents in, that I moved back to when I graduated from law school. And so I ran from my district, and I ran against someone who had no business being there, to be honest with you, and defeated her soundly in my first attempt at public office. It wasn't calculated beyond, I want to serve my community, my neighborhood where I grew up. And I didn't start thinking about, well, how am I going to get elected to Congress? I tried to set about doing a good job in the state house. And I really appreciate you saying what you said. That's very kind of you to say that I was thought of highly and then I did a good job, because I tried really, really hard to represent my district well and to work with everybody. I never had the attitude even when I was a Democrat, that the Republicans were my enemy, and that I needed to at every opportunity try to embarrass them, or say ugly things about them, or try to I just politics wasn't blood sport for me. It was an opportunity to achieve public policy objectives for my constituents. And so I was really interested in education, and early childhood education was a big deal for me. That ended up becoming a big deal for the governor and for the Republicans. But at the time, I was sort of a lonely voice out in the wilderness saying we really need to expand pre-K in the state. I think we got kids who are starting school behind, that kind of thing. So I've tried to chase public policy objectives, not offices. I ran for mayor specifically because it had nothing to do with wanting to move up, and I think, again, in your conception or some people's conception, going to the city level from the state was actually going the opposite direction. But it was an opportunity to help my city that I love very much at a time when I think it was really on the precipice. The incumbent mayor at the time was term limited. And you had a big field of people running for mayor, not one of which I believed was prepared or ready to lead our city. Not one of which I thought had the right motives for running, or the skill set that it was going to take to move the city in the direction it needed to move. And so I was the last entrant, and a surprise entrant into a race that had already 8 people in it. I was the 9th person to get in. I filed to run like in late January for a race that was going to be in May. Had no money, had no idea where the money was going to come from. No one asked me to run. I wasn't recruited to run. I just volunteered to do something that I thought needed to be done for my city. And I went about campaigning really hard while I was in the legislature at the same time. So I'd go to session in the morning, go to my meetings, committee meetings, vote, and then come home in the evenings when I could to knock on doors and campaign. A lot of people ask me, why aren't you participating in all of these? Dallas has this thing where in our mayoral elections, people like to have every neighborhood association wants to have a mayoral debate. Every organization wants to have a mayoral debate. I mean, you can literally go to 100 of them if you're running for mayor, if you want to, in 5 months.
Right.
You can have 20 a month if you'd like. And I made the decision that the voters aren't at these events. I don't want to hurt these organizations' feelings. I don't want to hurt these neighborhood associations' feelings, but the voters are at home, disengaged. They're not voting at the rate they probably ought to because people aren't coming to them with the message. And I'm not going to meet them at your debate.
You'll see the very same group of people at every one of those debates.
Mayoral debates in Dallas are pep rallies for the candidates to fill with their people. So what happens is you run for mayor, you sign up for a debate, or you agree to a debate, and then you call all your supporters and say, "Hey, we need you to stack the audience." And every candidate does the same thing. And the only people there are the respective candidates, cheerleading squads. There's no undecided voters that are being reached. So what I would do is I'd say, while y'all are doing that, I'm going to be on the phone talking to undecided voters. I'm going to be at the doorstep of undecided voters. I did a couple of those debates, didn't do very many, and won that race overwhelmingly. And so that's how I got into city politics. I wanted to actually do the job of being the mayor, and I've tried over the past almost 7 years now to show everybody that the job of mayor of Dallas at this point in history is a different job than maybe what it was 20 years ago. It's not just about ribbon cuttings and slapping backs anymore, and then go and play a lot of golf with your buddies at the Dallas Country Club or Trinity Forest. This is a public policy job, and I have been very serious about pushing the city in a policy direction, and that has ruffled some feathers. But I think the city's moment that we're having right now is largely attributable to me putting my nose down and withstanding a lot of criticism for being more focused on policy than politics and backslapping. So
I want to drill down something you said for a second there. Most of us can go our entire lives and not be impacted by the President of the United States. Now, we might choose to emotionally get wrapped up in something a president does or says, but for the most part, presidents don't impact our daily lives in meaningful ways all that much. On the other hand, a bad mayor, a bad city council, from potholes to, delays in stores opening, all these kind of things that city councils can either do well or screw up. But yet, 85% of voters don't participate in local elections. 85% of us, 90% of us who are registered to vote, we tend to not participate in city elections. How do you overcome that? What do you say to folks to get them involved and engaged in local government where they can actually make a difference impacting someone's life very quickly?
I think we have to think hard about why that is. Like, why I think what you said is true. I'm going to stipulate that I think it's a true statement.
Spoken like a good lawyer there.
Well, I think it's true that people care more or are more engaged or pay more attention to or participate more in what's going on in presidential elections and in presidential years and in federal elections than they do in the more local elections. So everything from school board, city council, even county races. I think that there is this sharp division between the amount of participation and attention you get on the federal races versus the local ones. And I think it is actually inversely related, interestingly, inversely correlated with the impact that they have on your lives. Right. Between what's happening at your school board, your city council, and your county, compared to what's happening in your life that's a function of what's going on in Congress, it's not even close. The former is far more influential. So the question becomes, well, why then, if people are, as they teach you in public policy school, they teach you in political science, they teach you in economics, if people are rational actors in this rational actor model that we make all these theories based on is true, why aren't people participating more in the levels of government that impact their lives more than they are in the levels that impact their lives the least? The rational actor model would suggest that you'd have much more participation in city council, since people care more about potholes, and if they have children, they care more about the school system, and they care more about the taxes and things that are impacting them at the local level. Why don't they participate more? I think the answer, or at least a part of the answer, is the formula has been confounded by television and by the media. If you think about it, television is a broadcast medium. Right. And you can't appeal to broad swaths of people by talking about super narrow school district issues, because just in Dallas alone, you're in 50 different school districts, right? Or 40 different, literally. Like the city of Dallas is sitting in Dallas ISD, Richardson ISD, Plano ISD, part of it's in Highland Park ISD, DeSoto ISD, Duncanville ISD, Irving ISD. I'm not even done. Garland ISD. We have parts of our state that are in all these different ISDs. So news coverage that's aimed at independent school districts is going to miss a lot of folks if it's not their particular school district. Same with municipalities. Dallas is one municipality in this area, but so there are literally 100 others in North Texas, hundreds of others in North Texas. And so what happens is television focuses on the thing that gets the biggest bucket of folks to pay attention, which is the federal stuff, and then the state stuff after that. And so because they get the most attention on television, and that's how most people are getting their information. And look, it's just, I've seen the numbers. It's not even close. Right. The Dallas Morning News, God bless them, nobody's reading it compared to how many people are watching Fox 4. Right. I'm talking about just our local television, not Fox News, but Fox 4, the weather and the sports and the local coverage. It's not even close. So given that, the people that they feel like they know the most about and they're most excited about are the president and the statewide folks, the governor and stuff like that, our U.S. senators. They know the most about those folks. They see the most coverage about that. And if they're getting their news from cable television, they're definitely getting a heavy dose of the loudest, most vociferous members of Congress. So, they've heard of, certain Congress folks, who know how to get on cable TV. And so the local stuff, just, I think because the media doesn't pay as much attention to it because it's too divided up. The public doesn't know as much about it, and so they're less engaged on it. What do we do about it? I think the best thing I can think of just off the top of my head is we've got to get more engaging folks, more big personalities, more outgoing, interesting folks to run for local government. I mean, you need bigger personalities running for mayor and city council. You need bigger personalities at the county level. We've had some figures like that in Dallas and then throughout the state. There are a handful of mayors that folks have remember and know in different cities around the state, and different county officials, county judges and whatnot. But I think we need more of that to get more folks paying attention. But it is true that there's no comparison. What we're doing at City Hall and what's happening at the county courthouse and what's happening at the DISD administration building in particular have more of an impact on everybody in the city of Dallas than anything that's happening or not happening in Washington, D.C.
So we want to take a little sideline for a second. We've used this phrase a couple of times. When Eric was a Democrat, okay, kind of leads like, well, you're not a Democrat, you're a Republican now. Which I've always wanted to ask you this question, so forgive me.
Now you have a chance.
Right. Now the question. Now I have a chance to ask you the question. There's a part of me that when I saw you in 2023 announce that you're switching to the Republican Party, you'd been the mayor for several years at that point. Yeah. You're in Dallas County, not a Republican stronghold. Yep. You're in the city of Dallas, not thought of as a Republican stronghold. And all I could think was, wow, does poor Eric not have any friends who would say, man, don't switch parties. That's not a good idea politically. Do you not have any friends who would say, why the party switch? What inspired you to, halfway through being mayor, to make that switch?
Well, I think there's a couple questions in there, and I'm going to take I think I'm going to take the one that I've not heard anyone ask before first, which is, did you not have anybody tell you how painful that might be, or what are you doing being in a blue county, blue city, doing that? The answer is I didn't run it past anybody. I think this shocks people. I actually didn't have any advice on it because I didn't want any. Bear with me because I think this is going to sound weird at first. It's the most political decision I've ever made in my life, and it's also the least political decision I've ever made at the same time, meaning it had tremendous political ramifications, and I knew it would. I didn't know what they would be. I honestly didn't know how the world would react to it, but I needed to do it for me, for personal reasons, and so I didn't want to be unduly influenced and maybe talked out of it or talked into it by anybody, because I wanted to do it for my reasons. And number two, I didn't want the perception to be, and I knew it would be because this is just how the world works. I didn't want to be perceived as having been sort of, brought it to the party by anyone in particular. Right. So this is true. And I've never really gotten this deep into this issue with anybody before, but here's the truth. My entire life, I've sort of struggled with my own personal conservatism versus the need in some ways that you feel if you want to continue to be a member in good standing in the Black community, and certainly in the liberal schools that I went to for college. It just, being a Democrat is just the path of least resistance. You get left alone if you're a Democrat. If you pop your head up and say, I'm a Republican, then you just become the target of so much vitriol and hatred, really. It's unbelievable how well the Democrats have done in getting Black people to equate being Black with being a Democrat, to the point where it feels very personal to Black people if you say you're not a Democrat anymore. It becomes a personal affront, like you're saying that you don't want to be a part of our family anymore. I mean, it's very odd, because a political party is just, to me, a means to win an election, which is just a means to exercise political power, which is just a means to bring about a particular change. And so all of those things should be able to be, if the ultimate goal is to bring about a particular change, you should be open to any means of doing that. Why are we so wedded to this one political party? It's like, I don't understand. Like, the Democrat Party doesn't show up at your funeral or show up at your parents' funeral or is there to console you when something happens to your kid or something like that. I'm like, they're not a member. It's just a political party. And if it's not serving your needs, I don't understand why we're so loyal to it as Black people. So point is this. I didn't want to be talked into it. I didn't want to be talked out of it. I had been dealing with like I said, the personal tension between my personal belief system for many, many years. And what really was the straw that broke the camel's back for me was once I was no longer in the partisan environment of the legislature and I was running Dallas as the mayor, and I had to start really just doing what needed to be done to benefit my constituents. And I was going to have to own whatever those decisions were. I wasn't going to be able to hide in a caucus anymore. And, the truth of the matter is, when you're a legislator, you actually have to work hard to get people to pay attention to your individual opinion about things. You have to fight to get media coverage of your ideas, your legislation, your vote. No one cares because you're just one of a herd of votes. You're just one of, 70-ish votes on the Republican or Democrat side. Nobody really cares about any individual person's vote. You're not personally responsible unless you are literally the deciding vote on something in a committee or something like that. No one cares. Mayor's the exact opposite situation. Everybody cares about what the mayor thinks, has to say, votes on anything of importance to the city. And so once I became the mayor, I realized how different it was. I realized like what I said and did on things like defund the police mattered. And it was a gut check. I had to say, do I want to be a good Democrat and have national and state Democrats patting me on the back saying, you're being a good Black Democrat mayor by saying all these nonsensical things about defunding the police, like about how what we need to be doing right now in the wake of George Floyd is either defunding by, 50, 60% our police departments, which was what was being asked of me in Dallas, or dismantling police departments. Like, the thing to do if I wanted some pats on the back was to run around saying things like, the police departments really are just, remnants of the old slave patrols. They're slave patrols. And it's about time we had somebody, bring this to the fore so we can now talk about getting rid of police altogether. Like, let's reimagine policing in this country and maybe get rid of police departments altogether and just have every community be, responsible for its own safety and occasionally send a social worker out to a crime scene. I mean, like, it got to be crazy.
Right.
And I put my foot down. I just said, I don't care how this is perceived. I don't care how bad a standing I'm going to have. We're not defunding a damn thing here. We're just not going to do that. Like really, we're just not. It's asinine. Not only is it a bad idea for the just obvious reasons. The people you purport to care the most about, these African American and Latino communities, are the ones least in a position to have the police removed from their communities. And they're the ones who are asking the most for more police presence in their communities. Granted, the police need to be well-trained and all the other stuff, but to me, that's obvious. I mean, of course, the police need to be well-trained, and of course, all that stuff is important. That's a given, but they don't want the police out. And it's frankly white liberals from the safety and security of either non-crime infested parts of Dallas or not even from Dallas at all. I'm just being very real with you, Michael. The noise during defund the police was coming from people who don't live in Dallas at all, like these imported protesters. They were either from the surrounding suburbs or from other cities or states altogether, or from parts of our city where they're not worried about crime at all. And they were just, frankly, ginning up and leveraging a national situation that happened in a jurisdiction far away, that has challenges and issues that are not ours. Like the situation in Minneapolis did not mirror whatsoever the situation in Dallas and our relationship between our police department and our community, but it was being activists were pretending like it was to get attention for themselves and to get money and resources, of which, white liberals were more than happy to supply to assuage whatever guilt they're still carrying around from the 60s or whatever. And it was just a mess. And I just said a no. And it made a lot of people very angry. But it also made some people that I didn't know appreciate that position. And I had a lot of support from Republicans, from the governor and lieutenant governor to our U.S. senators on down. And it made me start to ask myself, is this the time? Like, is this the moment when I should just make my party affiliation match my personal values and stop this charade of trying to make the Democrat Party fit who I actually am? Because at this point, it's just very clear. Anybody who's paying attention ought to be able to see this. There's no such thing as a conservative Democrat anymore. You can't be, that's not a thing that you can be anymore. I tried to be that. There's no wing of the party anymore that is still trying to push for anything like low taxes, public safety. Like, it is a choice between Democrat socialists and just far left Democrats now. Like that's your choice. And so I said, I'm done. I'm ready to go. And I made the switch and never looked back. And I'm very happy I made it. And I still am happy I made it. But I didn't run it past anybody. I didn't ask anybody. And it shocked and surprised everyone in terms of there's not one Republican of any stature who could say they knew it happened, which is why you didn't hear anybody say. Greg Abbott didn't know. Dan Patrick didn't know. John Cornyn didn't know. Ted Cruz didn't know. Nobody knew it was coming. Ken Paxton, none of my buddies from serving in the legislature, none of them had any advance notice. Congressman Good, and he was my former desk mate in the House. I had some very, very close friends who you would think I would have told ahead of time, but I needed it to be my decision, and I needed to not have the perception that I had been walked over by anybody, and that's how I did it, and I'm happy I did it that way.
Let's talk about Dallas for a second again. We're seeing in this time, kind of like maybe a cycle with elections or something, I don't know, but the unrest in some of our big cities.
Yeah.
And I think that for many folks, there's maybe a perception, well, surely Dallas is going to explode. Surely Dallas is going to have, protests against ICE or more anti-police protests. We haven't had that in Dallas. Big city. Large city, one of the largest cities. Why does it feel like Dallas just doesn't have time for that silliness?
I'll be very blunt about this because I don't think that's who we are. I think there's in any major city, any city of any size, Dallas is approaching 1.4 million people. Mm-hmm. Of course, you're going to have some segment of our city that has any of a range of views, right? There's going to be, sure. Are there some far left people here? Sure. Some people who would call themselves socialists? Sure. Some people who are anti-police? Sure. Some people who are anti-ICE? Sure. I'm sure all that element exists here. The question is, relative percentages and what constitutes what we used to call that silent majority. In any community, city or otherwise, there's a culture. There's a silent majority that really dictates what the culture is. It's not always the most outspoken folks is the key. And so in Dallas, if you ask me, if you gave me a truth serum injection or a polygraph, and I had to tell you the blunt, honest truth, I'd say our fundamental culture and DNA is not far left. It's not. That's a fringe element of our city. Our city is very pragmatic, focused on families, focused on community, focused on faith, focused on trying to figure out how to take care of our families, and just not out there like that. And so Yeah, anytime there's a national incident, there's some fringe element of folks who are going to take the City Hall Plaza for a day or two and protest. Anytime there's something that happens, I think we have protest envy here, some of our activists, because they honestly, they don't have the built-in support here and large numbers of folks who share those beliefs. So they're always trying to gin it up, and they have to try to manufacture it. And it's just, and it doesn't take, because that's really just not who we are. We're not Minneapolis. We're not Seattle. We're not San Francisco. We're not even Austin. We're not any of those places. And so our activists have to try to pretend like we are, and they get a couple days of news coverage. But at the end of the day, Dallas is a city that people choose because of the economic opportunity, because it is safe, because people here, look, the overwhelming majority of people here are pro-police and support the police. I've seen data on this. This is not me just sort of, doing the mayor thing, saying, no, we love her. No, really, the bent of Dallas residents is pro-police. Like they generally trust the police. They generally want more police everywhere. They like the police. We support the police. It's just a pro-law enforcement type of town. So sure, will there be some fringe folks who don't like the fact that we have immigration laws at all and that there's an entity called ICE duly created by an act of Congress and enforcing actual laws of the United States? Yes, there's a far left fringe element that exists that doesn't believe ICE should even exist. They want to abolish ICE or, have ICE. That's not the majority or even close to the majority of folks in Dallas. That's not the sentiment here. So they have a First Amendment right to express themselves, but this isn't a sanctuary city. This isn't a city that's going to, go up in flames over this issue, because it's just not where we are. And look, I have a very good read and pulse of this city, not just because I'm the mayor, but it's the only city I've ever known as home. I was born and raised here. Dallas ain't that town. That's an Austin thing, maybe, of any Texas town, or a coastal thing. That's not a Dallas thing.
You're a relatively young guy, younger than me. So I mean, you're a young guy.
Older, yeah. Feeling it.
You're not going to be mayor forever.
No.
You can't be the mayor forever in Dallas. What do you want? I mean, you're going to be living here. I mean, it's hard to imagine Eric Johnson not living in Dallas, as you've kind of alluded to. So what do you want to see happening in Dallas? What maybe it's what legacy do you want? That seems silly and trite. But more it's what policies do you want to see moving forward in Dallas to make sure that this is not just a moment for Dallas, but rather this is the start of a legacy for Dallas?
I think there are a lot of things I want for my city, and this is my city. I mean, I was born here, grew up here. My parents were born and grew up here. My family came here after World War II. My family's from East Texas. My grandfather, when he got discharged from the Army at the end of the war, moved my grandmother and their one child at the time, my oldest uncle, to West Dallas, and that's when we got here, and we've been here ever since. And so this is my town, and I love it. And so there are a lot of things I want for it, but I guess I have to think in terms of, triage and priority. My top priority, I think, for the city is to think about its future economically, how to make sure our tax base continues to grow so that we don't have to continually tax people more and more to keep up with the infrastructure needs of folks, because there's this, and I don't want to bore folks, but essentially, if you have more development in your city, you have more economic growth within your city, you can tax everybody less because you have a higher base to tax. If the base starts to dwindle because you lose it to the suburbs or you lose it anywhere, frankly, as long as it's not in your city limits, if you start to bleed tax base to maintain even the level of service you had the year prior, you have to tax people at a higher rate. So the economic future of Dallas depends on its development and growth to make sure we don't become this high tax city that people can't afford to be in. And I really believe that is directly linked to Y'all Street. I think the financial services industry has got a crush on Dallas, and Dallas has got a crush on the financial services industry. We need to stop denying it and just understand that's what we are. We are a financial services kind of town. We have a very diverse economy, and we do a lot of things very well. But I think the way Austin is known for tech, even though it has other things, and the way Houston is known for petrochemicals, and even though it has other things, I think Dallas is going to be known as the financial services capital, not just of Texas, but eventually the United States of America. And even though we have other things, we have a great medical industry. We've got a great, healthcare industry. We've got all kinds of other industries, but I think financial services is really a huge part of our future, and we need to lean into that. So I want to see very aggressively us go after more of these companies, get more of them to expand operations here. If they don't leave New York altogether, they should expand their operations, like Goldman Sachs. So Goldman Sachs is a great example of a company that hasn't said we're leaving New York altogether, but has done the next best thing, which is said, okay, but it's going to be our second largest office in our entire company, probably going to be our biggest office in the entire company at some point. We're going to put every function of the bank, not just the back office stuff, like every division of Goldman Sachs will be represented there. We're going to pour nearly $1 billion into this one office, and we're going to employ 5,000 people, and the starting salary is going to be in the low six figures. I mean, that's super impact. That's one company. And so then Scotiabank comes along and says, well, we don't have a presence there at all, but we like what we're seeing. So we're going to bring 1,000 completely new employees with the same base salary, starting salary, and the same type of, worker. And those are folks that are going to come here. They're going to buy homes here. They're going to live, work, and play in our central, part of our city. It's going to make downtown Dallas and the whole area around downtown much more vibrant. That's great. So we need to do that. But we also need to, I think, make sure that we can't lose. And I had one economist that said this so well at an event I was at years ago. After I was mayor, I went to a conference about, the vitality of cities and things. And this economist, whose expertise is in cities, says the cities that are going to win the future are the cities that are the most fun, because that's really what people want to live in cities for. I do think that Dallas has to be mindful going forward that being a practical choice for people goes a long way. It's a great thing. But we have to make sure that the city's actually a vibrant and fun place for people to live. And so I think we have to make sure that we, particularly in the central part of our city, have amazing entertainment options for people. That includes professional sports. We want to, as many of our professional sports teams as possible playing in the city, right in the core of the city. We need more restaurants. We need more bars. We need more residential and hotels, and just constant activity going on in our urban core, so that Dallas is a fun place to be. We concert venues, of all sizes. So, we can get those sort of smaller, more intimate type shows from artists who are not still doing, stadium shows or arena shows, but are still great. We need the kind of concert venue that James Taylor wants to play, right? And I've actually been to a show of his in a facility in Boston. It's like the exact type size that we need to have more of in Dallas. We need to build all that stuff, and we need to make sure that we are positioning ourselves to be a fun city for younger people coming out of college and grad school, starting their careers, to come to put down their roots, and then they stay. And so, to me, those are the most important things we ought to be doing, along with always making sure it's a safe place to be. So Dallas was already perceived the last time that this was looked at as the safest major city in America. We need to live up to that perception at all times and be the safest major city in America. That means we have to support our police department, our first responders, with the money that they need to hire enough officers to keep us safe, and to keep the officers that we have by paying them good wages. We've just shored up our pension to make sure we don't lose them for that reason. So we got to do all that blocking and tackling stuff, but we really do also have to lean in on making downtown and the central part of our city vibrant and fun. So Convention Center project will help with that. Goldman Sachs and what they're doing is going to help with that. Hopefully, what we can do with our sports teams here will contribute to that. The Arts District is contributing to that. Clyde Warren Park is contributing to that. The Southern Gateway Park is going to contribute to that. It's just, I'm very bullish about Dallas, but we got to keep on charging really hard down this path that we're on.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for taking time to join us in this edition of Real Texans.